Hello and welcome to Zenatta Consulting's Beginner Series. My name is Tyler Colt, and in this video, we're going to be focused here on the CRM. And more specifically, we're going to walk through setting up an approval process here within the CRM. So we're going to kind of cover the use case here first, and then we'll jump into actually the nitty-gritty of setting this up within your own CRM. So here, if we look at our page, I'm starting on our home page here. And for this first example, we're going to go ahead and set up an approval for a deal. These are oftentimes where these types of processes occur, right? Where you might need to make sure that you have certain information before you move forward with the process. Or you just might want to make sure that the information that you have is actually good and valid and worth using to continue your deal flow. So here we have kind of a basic deal setup. I'm just using a couple of these default stages that come out of the box with Zoho. Of course, your CRM might look different if you've done some customization, but all of these same rules are still going to apply. So if we look at this deal here, we might want to scroll down the page and see, we kind of have this qualification information and needs information sections down here defined where a salesperson can fill in this information as they are having these first meetings with their client. Something that we've oftentimes seen is that sometimes you'll have one team member doing a qualification, and then it kind of gets handed off to the closer to, finalize the needs analysis, get the proposal out the door, and do any negotiation that has to happen about that proposal. But for a lot of organizations, you want to make sure that the people doing the qualification are getting you everything you need to pass that forward to your closing team. And so we're going to take this in two different parts of how we might approach a situation like this. So first, we're going to want to make sure that all of the data is filled in about qualification before we ever move to needs analysis. So we're going to throw in a little bonus lesson here about layout rules, because I think they go hand in hand with approvals. So what we're going to do first is we're jumping into our settings, and we're going to open up modules and fields. We're going to open up the deals, because that's where we're working right now. And we'll go ahead and set up a layout rule. A layout rule is basically a way to use the input of one field to require or show other fields on that same record. So I'm going to make a new layout rule. We're going to call this on stage change, because that's our primary field that we're going to use to define this. And so we'll go ahead and say that when stage is needs analysis, we will go ahead and set certain fields as mandatory. Now, if we wanted, we could say that they only show up once we enter this stage. But in this case, we really just want to say that when we're going to move to needs analysis, certain fields from our deal become mandatory. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these qualification fields mandatory at that point, saying that we cannot move it to this stage until that occurs. And so those three fields are budget, deal type, and time frame to complete. So I'm going to go ahead and add those in here. Alrighty. And just like that, we've now added the layout rule. So if I jump back over to our deal here, I'm going to give it a refresh just to make sure that that update we just made applies. But now these fields here are empty. And if I try to move this over to needs analysis, I get a little pop-up saying that I actually have to fill these in before I can make that change. And if I cancel out of here, what we'll see is that the stage is going to stay under qualification. So with that, we've kind of covered step one here, which is going to be making sure that the fields are filled in before you go to needs analysis. Our next step is going to be actually setting up the approval to make sure that people can review the quality of that data before anyone else gets notified or before we actually make any changes. So what we'll do for that is we'll open up our settings, and we'll go ahead and log into the approval processes here under process management. and we'll go ahead and add a new one. So the first thing we'll do here is determine which module we want to run this for. You can do them for basically any module inside the CRM. So if you're doing quoting in here, it's really powerful to do some price review on quotes and make sure that things aren't going out the door with margins that you don't want to commit to. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and use the deals module for right now. So we're going to call this the approval for needs analysis. We're going to have this trigger when the record is edited. And now we're actually going to make our rule. So in essence here, our first section is the criteria. This is basically asking us at what point should this approval rule trigger. And so in our case, we're going to make this trigger once it's moved to needs analysis. Next, we'll need to determine who is the approver for this particular record. So you can set up approvers based on users, based on role, based on a user group, based on levels in your organization, or you can even say it needs to be approved by the direct manager of the owner of that record. And that would kind of apply to your role hierarchy. We actually did a different walkthrough video on profiles and roles a couple weeks back that might help if you're not familiar with roles, groups, and kind of the manager and subordinate relationships there. For this one here, I'm going to go ahead and set this up as a certain role can approve this. So we're going to say that either the CEO or a general manager can approve this. Now, sometimes you might want to say that every single person needs to come in here and approve a certain thing to happen. In this case, we're just going to leave this on the list of two different users, and whoever gets to it first, we're going to trust them to validate whether we're ready to move forward. Last thing you can do here is actually go ahead and create a task to the approver if you want to put something on their list so that they see that they need to do this thing. So now the minute that I move this to needs analysis, the record is going to be locked for approval and a task will be created for those other users to go ahead and approve this record. Now, lastly here, we are able to determine what needs to happen upon approval of the record. So in this case, you might want to update a particular field. You might want to create a task back to a different user. You might want to send an email, call a webhook, or even run a custom function. Examples of these usages are we might want to create a task back to the new closer saying, hey, this data has been approved, you're ready to go. You might want to send an email to the original person who qualified it, letting them know that it's been approved. And then, of course, with our custom functions, you can do just about anything once one of these gets approved. On the other end of the spectrum here, if the record gets rejected, we're able to also trigger actions to happen based on that rejection. So emails can go out, fields can be updated, and webhooks and functions can be called to do any custom actions that need doing. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and set up a task. And we're going to assign this task back to the original owner of that record. All right, and with that, we're going to go ahead and save our approval rule. Now, one thing that's important to know is that one approval rule can actually cover multiple different sections. So if you wanted different types of approvals to happen on each different stage where different stakeholders are brought in and different people are kind of pinged to give their 2 cents, you can set all that up under one rule. So now let's go ahead and jump over to our deal and kind of walk through these 2 steps and how they play together, being that layout rule to require data, and then the approval process to actually lock the record until that approval is given. Alrighty, so we have our deal here that we were looking at earlier, currently in the qualification status. I'm now going to go ahead and move it to needs analysis. Now, this is going to ask us for those required fields that we added earlier. And once I've entered these fields and clicked save, our layout rule is satisfied and that stage will update. And so now as we look at this record, we'll see a couple things. We'll see that this record has been locked. So the approval process will actually lock the record until we make those changes that we need to make or approve the record, which will allow it to move forward. We'll also see that under our activities here, we've actually created a task for the CEO and admin, which is our user 2. I'm currently logged in here as user 1. And so they have a task on their list to log in here and approve this record. We'll also see that on my side, as the one requesting approval, I can see if there are multiple things that need to be approved. Those are all going to sit here, and I can actually see where I'm at in that process when I look at the record. Now, one thing that is important to note is that once a record is submitted for approval, it's locked until it's approved, with the assumption that everything is done and we're sending it to the right people with the right information to actually give that approval. So if person 1 had approved and person 2 had not yet, you're not going to be able to edit data in the meantime. So you only want to use these if that is what you want, because there's no way to turn that off. So now this approval has been queued up for the other user in our demo account. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to user 2 and take a look at what actually giving approval looks like. Alrighty, so now we have logged in under the demo user 2. So now we're the person whose approval is being requested. We'll see that on their task list, they have a task to approve that qualification. They can use that task to actually get directly to the record that needs to be approved. So I can actually jump just directly in here to the deal. And we'll see that once I do it, the lock record is still here because I've not approved it yet. Up here in the top right, because I am user 2, I'm actually able to now respond to this approval. So I can either approve, reject, or delegate that approval if I don't want to be the one to review the data myself, and I want to say I trust this other person to do this record. I'll also quickly show, if you're doing a lot of approvals, there's a little section called My Jobs. This section here for My Jobs is actually going to give them one list of everything that needs to be approved. So if you're deploying these and you have a lot of records going through, it's good to use this rather than just the tasking so that they can see everything just in one place that hasn't been approved yet. So if I am the approving user here, I can open up our record. Generally speaking, I would recommend that they actually go to the deal or to that record to give the approval, just to make sure that they can actually see all of the data. And once I get here, I might skim down the record. I look at our qualification info. I see a reasonable budget. I see a deal type that's filled in and a time frame that looks reasonable based on the type of work that we do. So I'll go ahead and approve and leave my comment if I'd like. And now that I've approved it, I'll go ahead and close out my task. Now, an example here of where you might like a custom function on approval or rejection is to like auto close that task if it gets approved so that you can save that click. But now here, looking at our record, we're now off of lockdown. So edits can now be made to this record again as we move forward in the process. We'll also see that we've queued up a task here for that original record owner, letting them know that the record has been approved and that processes are moving forward there. So that once they log in, they can give this a double check and then close out that task. And with that, I think we've covered the main important things here for approvals. So we kind of walked through setting up the layout rule there at the beginning, as well as setting up the actual approval to notify the right people that need to take a look. Of course, really hope that you found this video useful. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe down below. That really helps us out and it makes sure that our videos get in front of the most amount of people so that we can all make the best use of these tools within Zoho. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you for our next session.